Lowe's has you covered for all those projects on your summer to-do list and will even help you save. Give your home a whole new look inside and out with $10 to $40 off paint, exterior stains, and resurfacers via rebate. And add a pop of color to your porch or patio with flowers. Get your choice 2 for $10 basic 1.5-gallon hanging baskets. All projects have a starting point. Start with Lowe's. Paint offer valid 6/21 through 7/5. Exclusions apply. Plan offer valid 6/28 through 7/5. Color and selection vary by location while supplies last. U.S. only.
You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to NightVision Radio, exposing the truth one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us. Welcome to NightVision Radio. Hi, everybody. Welcome to NightVision. I'm René Barnett, your host. Really excited about tonight's show for a number of reasons. My guest tonight is a photojournalist, an international photojournalist and investigative reporter in the field of extraterrestrial-related phenomena research. She's also a widely published freelance writer, especially in Europe. She's studied extraterrestrial-related phenomena since 1979 and is on personal terms with many of the leading researchers in the field. From 80 to 86, she assisted Dr. J. Allen Hynek, we all know who that is, with his UFO investigations, and has interviewed many top military witnesses concerning their involvement in the government truth embargo. And along that line, in 1997, she met and interviewed Colonel Corso in Roswell, New Mexico, and became a personal friend and confidant of his. She was instrumental in having his book, The Day After Roswell, which he wrote with Bill Burns, and my guest wrote the preface. She had it translated into Italian, so it was wonderful. And then she returned to Roswell in the summer of 2003 for the American debut of her book, New Revised Connecting the Dots, Making Sense of the UFO Phenomena. She's since written 4 other books, all historical interviews with important whistleblowers. That's why I wanted to have her on tonight. She travels to Rome and currently to Latin America, but she lives right here in the US of A in Boulder, Colorado. She has a master's degree in education, teaches history and photojournalism, and online classes in exopolitics. Man, what a resume. So welcome, Paola Harris, tonight. Hi, Paola.
Thank you. Thank you, René. You really went through that. Thank you.
What a resume, man. You must be a busy lady. I'm so happy to have you on. And, you know, although you and I have never talked before this week, you're someone that I've followed your work through the years because of my interest in the UFO field. And, it's just high time that I had you on my show, so I do appreciate your accepting my invitation. Thanks so much.
Well, I love doing it, and you caught me just as I came back from Italy. I came back Tuesday. I'd been over there for a month, Italy and Spain, and I was over there for the release of my new book on Colonel Corso called Conversations with Colonel Corso. Because they had done it, they did it in Italian, and re-released The Day After Roswell and The Dawn of a New Age, which is the original note. So there were 3 Corso books that I had to do conference on in Rome. And then I flew over to Barcelona, Spain, because I'm doing reporting on the Latin American contactees, in particular Ricardo Gonzalez. So, I've in the last 30 years, I've gone from nuts and bolts, research to the contact scenario, which I wouldn't touch in the early days.
Right. I know, it's funny because, as you know, I'm sure there's long sort of been a divide in the UFO community between, the so-called contactees and the abductees, or the spiritual people, the spiritual seekers, and the what we call the nuts and bolts UFO guys. Do you see a convergence coming about? Because it seems like when I look at your work, I'm sort of seeing that.
Well, the only ones of my colleagues really that I'm looking at this with is Grant Cameron and Dr. Stephen Greer and Colin Andrews. Colin Andrews, who's a good friend, just started with, crop circles, and his book, The Edge of Reality, is all about consciousness and consciousness raising. And it's fascinating. When I start talking, I'm going to sound like a teacher because I got a list of books that people should read, because they should read. They get off the silly internet research where it's become entertainment totally, and read some of the great books that these people have written. The Edge of Reality, Colin talks about it, the crop circles that in the beginning that were probably real, and even the ones that are being made now are being inspired by somebody up there, and he talks about consciousness as being the component there. And then we've got Grant Cameron, who started with presidential UFO stuff, and his last books are how the rock stars were downloaded by the ETs, including John Lennon, the Moody Blues, David Bowie. I mean, I had him speak at my conference in Laughlin, and he blew everybody out of the water because he moved over into that consciousness component. And, of course, my friend Dr. Stephen Greer, I was in his film Sirius. I was in the film, plus I was a consultant on Unacknowledged that just came out. And Stephen has always been of the mind that the consciousness component is what we have in common with the ETs, and that's what needs to happen for contact. So, those colleagues have gone there. The other ones, have a lot of them have stayed with nuts and bolts. I mean, especially the Roswell people are nuts and bolts and documents, and a lot of the others, conspiracy theory, which, conspiracy theory, I've lived through a lot of situations where I know it's true. It's just that I don't take time to do it because it doesn't raise consciousness. It's more fear-based, and I'm trying to get away from the fear-based ufology that really tends to be more entertainment. And I'm trying to look at the reason for the visitations on the planet.
Well, that's great to hear. I totally get it, and I think the field of ufology, like every other research field I've kind of been involved in, could stand a little bit of an overhaul in some ways or another. And I mean, you're right. There's some fabulous work that's been done out there, some books and things, but there is sort of that carnival element sometimes that does distract.
Well, I always, Renee, what I say is, some of these conferences, and I won't ever do that at Laughlin, when you have these statues of these gray aliens and you're supposed to have your picture taken and they're in the lobby of some hotel, I don't think any self-respecting scientist or astronomer or Stephen Hawking or anybody like that would even walk in the room. And that's what I'm trying to invite, is the outside world, because it can't be just a bunch of people that are fan-based and they all hang out together, and because we will never get disclosure like that. I mean, what we want is we want it in the mainstream. We don't want just it being like everybody have a party type thing. We want it in the mainstream. It is, and I will state this, the most important question for mankind. And when you have all these statues and these cartoons and these, T-shirts and all the merchandising around it, but especially the statues of the gray aliens that everybody needs to pose next to, it puts it in a level of not serious study. And since I have a master's in education, what I love to see is a university class on the whole UFO phenomenon, starting with the anthropological ancient alien stuff.
Oh, that's really interesting. Last week, I had on Chris Hardy, Dr. Chris Hardy from France, who you may know, and she's done a lot of work in. She was at Princeton, and she's done a lot of work on the sort of Sitchin material on ancient aliens. And what she's done is sort of that sort of psychological and anthropological examinations of these characters, not only in these ancient texts that Sitchin talked about, these cuneiform texts and things like that, but also in the Bible and other religious texts. And she sort of did personality profiles and things, and not only on individuals, but sort of on the cultures of the time. And it really helps to put things into context that way. It's very, very revealing, and it's interesting work that I hadn't really seen anybody do to the extent that she's working on that. But I couldn't agree with you more. I see your work and this conference that you have coming up. I think this is the fourth year now for the Star Works?
Yeah, and it's basically theme-based. Last year it was music, art, and UFOs, and we had, of course, I told you Grant Cameron talked about the download of the, we had people, performing music from South America. We had an art show, and you'd mentioned Paul Davis. We had his art on the wall, and it's still fun, but it's fun in a serious kind of cultural way. And we have a red carpet. This is at the Aquarius Hotel in Laughlin, Nevada. It's kind of the old, I started by the first couple of years bringing Bob Brown, and he'll be back this year just as a friend, because I was on the board of directors of the old IUFO, so I wanted to go back to the Aquarius, and so it's theme-based, number one. It's only 3 days, but we have a gala dinner and we have a cocktail party that's not extra. It's part of it with George Nuri of Coast to Coast. And in this year's theme is Time for Truth. So for the first time, we're going to put Clifford Stone on stage and have George question him. And, he's crash retrieval. I was instrumental in having his book, Eyes Only, published. And this is a man who did 12 crash retrievals. He's darn serious. I mean, there's nothing entertaining about doing crash retrieval and communicating with live aliens. So he's going to be, the focus. And then we had talked about this. I really, really want to promote women in ufology and in this field. So there's always 9 men and 9 women, or it may be fewer women in the future because they're so hard to find. But I'm kind of tired of seeing 39 men and Linda Moulton Howe. I mean, there's got to be like
I saw your promo, and I laughed out. I literally was sitting there by myself, and I laughed out loud when you said, "I'm tired of seeing 39 men and Linda Moulton Howe." And I thought, how true is that, especially back in the day, and I guess it's still true. And I was thinking,
she's amazing.
Paola's going to be like the new French Parliament. He's, President Macron is stacking at 50-50.
Yeah, well, she's amazing. She's absolutely great. But what happens when, we're almost the same age? I mean, what happens when we're not here? Are there no more women? I mean, what's going to happen? Is it going to be a male-dominated field? Don't we have to, hand the baton to future women? Don't we have to, encourage women to get involved? And so I'm really encouraging women to get involved in the field in whichever way they can, in a very serious way. In other words, information, not just contactees and so forth, because it traditionally it's been women that have been abducted or contactees and that. But there have to be some scholars, some researchers, some this year we have an incredible astrologer from New York City who writes plays, and that's Heather Ariel, and she's just amazing. And so I've incorporated some of that, and Andrea Perron is the author of House of Darkness, House of Light, around which The Conjuring movie was made, and she's there. And then, of course, Regina Meredith from Gaia Television. But, Andrea just loves the UFO question, and she's passionate about disclosure. And she was like one of my greatest proponents for when we had Steve Bassett speak. I mean, she supported him 100%. So the people in the paranormal field have come on board to work with disclosure issues also. And I, and I've kind of made one big happy family out of all of them, and they're really surprised that they can all, and that's one of the requirements even of the speakers, that they sit and listen to each other's lectures, because if this isn't about doing your show and walking out, you don't learn anything like that. You wanna be with a group of people and just get excited about what they're doing, and this is what I want to really, really work with, is a dialogue or a round table, or usually I have two panels where they're all discussing things and not just, promoting their own book, but discussing an issue like how can we change the paradigm, how can we have more consciousness-based learning. The questions are like very profound, and so it's really stimulating. The people that come out of the Star Wars Laughlin conference, and this happened last year, they signed up the following year right on the spot for the following conference.
That's fantastic.
And they go, we want more of this. This is like different. This is like, we all feel part of this new paradigm. We want to make a change. Whether it be, because I will tell you right here and now that the messages coming out of Latin America with the ETs that are walking off the ships and speaking to contactees are that there's going to be an ecological disaster, that we have problems on this planet ecologically and also conflictually, and it's a geopolitical problem, and we ought to know that they're still watching the planet because the planet is not settled.
No, it's very, very unsettled. In fact, I know it seems like during every period, it always seems like, things are terrible, and they've never been this bad, and the world's going to end or whatever. But I've lived long enough now to have experienced, several different periods of life. And I do feel like it's very, very chaotic and very messed up. And I just saw an article, I think it was yesterday, where, or maybe it was even this morning, where Antarctica is getting ready to break off in hours, literally hours or days. And, obviously due to, the ecology and climate change and whatever. So these things are...
But it even hits closer to home, because I was just in Europe, and June was the hottest month they've ever experienced, and that usually happens in August, so they're starting to ration water. And and poor Italians, they're not used to rationing anything. So it's like, you can't use water. In Spain, it was so hot. And apart from all of that, I think that what the ETs want, or what the cosmic cultures want, is us to kind of evolve to a situation where we take care of the planet, just like the Native Americans believed. Yep. We take care of ourselves. We evolve as people, and then we can have some kind of dialogue with them. They're not interested in speaking to us the way we are now. Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh!
You can imagine if they came here highly evolved. I mean, they would have to be, otherwise, because they've probably been through all these periods. Their planets have been destroyed. They've gone through all this, and somehow they're able to get here. And I'm talking about human-type aliens, and that is what my research has been the last 2 years. When I start doing presentations, I start from George Van Tassel, Adamski, Howard Menger in Europe, Eugenio Siracusa, the friendship case in Italy, down in Latin America, Sisto Paz and that Rama group. All these are human-type people. They encountered human-type people that came off ships that said, hey, you guys are, distantly related to us. Will you please get a clue? We aren't going to come down and save you, but would you wake up? Or flying over, we're not on vacation.
So now, could they intervene if they wanted to? Would there be something they could do?
Well, I think they already have. One of my speakers last year was Turkish researcher Esin Sakarara, and she told me, and she showed, and I knew this anyway, in several instances where meteors have fallen on the Earth, UFOs have been in to kind of destroy them into little pieces so they don't take out a whole entire city. If they're shutting down missiles in 1969 at Maelstrom, they are shutting down missiles with nuclear warheads. And you may consider that an act of war, but most of us consider that an act of peace. They're all pointed at Russia, these missiles with nuclear warheads. And I think that if you look at the history of ufology and study it, and I've interviewed so many people, a lot of the sightings that pilots have are over nuclear installations, nuclear power plants. Even the one in Stephenville, Texas, has had a nuclear power plant right there. It's their way of intervening without intervening. In other words, it's their way of saying, look, we're here, we're watching this, it's dangerous, please understand that if you're watching us and look at where we are. I have on my Facebook an article about UFOs in Afghanistan, and Jaime Maussan, who is a regular speaker at my conferences, brings all kinds of footage from abroad every year, and they're over war areas where we're fighting wars like Ukraine. He had 5 different videos of UFOs over the Ukraine. And again, I always joke about they're not on vacation, but as an investigative journalist, I look for patterns. And that is a pattern. They're over war zones. They're over where things could happen. And so I think, it's a very dynamic study, René. It's interesting, especially if you study all of it.
Oh, absolutely. It is very exciting, and I'm glad to see that your conference is sort of aiming in that direction. And it's really exciting. Now, that's in November in Laughlin at the
11/11.
Oh, 11/11. Well, why not?
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
like 11/10, 11/11, 11/12. So when people say, when is it, I go, just remember 11/11.
That's right. That's an easy one. Well, yeah. We'll take a break in just a few minutes, and I want to definitely get into your new book about your conversations with Colonel Corso, because I think that's really, really interesting. I remember when the book Day After Roswell came out, I think it was in 1996 or so, maybe I'm wrong about that, but it seems like...
No, it was the 50th anniversary, which is 1997. And
97, okay.
Ago. Yeah, 1997, because it happened in 47. So it was exactly 20 years ago, because this is the 70th anniversary of the Roswell.
Gosh, that's crazy. Year. Well, that's when I was working at Strange Universe, the TV show, and I remember that book coming, and I knew Bill Burns because I had been at UFO Magazine for several years, and that was the same time that he was taking that over. So I read that book with interest, and I've often wondered, if there was more to know, and if we would ever hear any more. And so I was excited to hear about your book, and hopefully you'll give us some revelations from that book a little bit later. But before we go to the break in a few minutes, could you tell me, how is it that you became interested in the UFO field? Did you have an experience? Did you see something? What drew your attention? I know you worked with Dr. Hynek, but what drew you to him?
The movie. Yeah, it was
Wow.
the movie. It was the movie. I've since been to Devil's Tower, so last year. But what happened was I watched the movie. I was a young mother with 2 kids, and I was teaching science fiction because I'm an English teacher, and I saw the movie. And at the end of the movie, there's this scene with Francois Truffaut, who's the director, representing Jacques Vallée, and there was this contact between these beings and him. He gives that smile, and the being raises his hand, and I started to cry. I had an emotional reaction to the movie, and I said, how do I, look at this movie? Is it real? And so I was at a wedding in Evanston, Illinois, and I heard about the Center for UFO Studies, and I thought, let me go in there. I mean, nobody will be there. Like, Hynek won't be there for sure. I just want to see what it's like in there. And sure enough, he was there. He came from around the corner with his pipe, and he said, I hear you speak Italian, and you were born in Italy. Would you like to work with me? And he said he then, sent me a typewriter, all the files, that I was supposed to work on. And yeah, and I knew it was real. So I it's like I say to people, this is not like, do you believe? There's no belief. This isn't religion. I knew it was real. He worked for Blue Book. My God, he worked for the Air Force. I was looking at the files. It was real. I mean, and so I thought, this is real. So I started with the best teacher in the world.
Oh, absolutely. That's amazing that you had that opportunity. And really, as a novice at the time, you'd just seen a movie and you got interested and you looked him up, and it must have been fate, for you to do this, because look how that changed the course of your life. Just really interesting. Who knows what course you would have taken. Maybe you would have continued on and done your studies in the field of ufology anyway. But my goodness, to have that opportunity to work with Dr. Hynek, and it was all started with you watching the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, I've heard Steven Spielberg had some ideas, about it. And of course they did, consult with Jacques Vallée, and actually had a character in the film that was based on him, very prominent in the film, the French scientist. And it was really good. I remember having a similar reaction to that film when I saw it for the first time when it first came out. I went to the theater, went to an afternoon matinee with my mother, who was out here visiting me in Los Angeles at the time from Oklahoma, where I'm from. And we took my 2 kids and went and saw the film, and it was very touching. And I think because one of the characters, and forgive me, I can't remember the woman's name, and it was a mom, and she ended up, getting so into it. I think it was easier for me to relate to. And it was just like, okay, these are like real people, and this is happening, and they're getting caught up into this thing.
That was Terry Garr, the actress Terry Garr. Yeah, she was Richard Dreyfuss's, wife in that. And what's so interesting about that film is, because I've been connecting dots for 30 years. I'm studying this, and I do study it. I mean, I read everybody's book. I got 300 books here, and everything that comes out, so that I read other people's research. I think that's one of the reasons we're having problems, is that researchers aren't reading other people's research and aren't doing, like a real study of it. But going back to that, I learned that there's some kind of hypnotic suggestion or some kind of messaging that the contactees get. Because you remember the Devil's Tower kept coming up in drawings. It kept coming up every which way. It was like an obsession. And I think that's very interesting, even on a psychological level. That should be studied, how these contactees get these ideas about going certain places, or about doing certain things, these suggestions they get.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. And we're going to talk about that and more after the break. We're going to get into the Colonel Corso material, which I find really interesting and exciting, and see what Paola learned that we don't know. And also, we're going to tell you how to get that book so you can read about all of it. So when we come back, more with Paola Harris. Welcome back to Night Vision. I'm your host, René Barnett. And if you're just joining us, we've been talking tonight with Paola Harris. She's a photojournalist, an author, a UFO phenomena researcher, and she's also the producer of the Star Works conference. And the next one is coming up in November, 11/11, in Laughlin, Nevada. So if you want to peruse that while we're talking, that's that website is starworksusa.com. Have a look at it and get over there if you can. I'm going to definitely try to make it this year because it sounds really, really interesting. We were talking about a little bit about Colonel Corso and the time that you spent with him, and I was wondering, do you feel that you were able to go further with him and get more information than what we might have learned in the book Day After Roswell? I've heard that there was, maybe some difference in what we actually were able to learn, or maybe he just later on came out with more information. Did you feel you had?
Well, let me give you some background, because people are very aware that this is the 70th anniversary, because if Roswell happened in 1947,
right?
The Day After Roswell came out in 1997, which was the 50th anniversary, and so he was the big star there. I mean, this came out, I was in Italy, my boss sent me over to cover the story, and of course I wasn't ready. I didn't even know what Colonel Corso looked like. I didn't know anything about the book. And I wasn't ready. In my book, I talk about the serendipity events that led to my relationship with the Colonel. And the thing is that at that time, everybody in the world was there. I mean, we had John Mack and Willie Striever and Linda and oh God, everybody was there. Bud Hopkins, everybody was there because it was the 50th anniversary. But Colonel Corso was really the curiosity. I think it even made a Time magazine cover, because and I ended up, and this is why this starts my book, My Life with Colonel Corso, in that I ended up in the room next to Colonel Corso when the whole place was sold out. I got the room next to him at the very last minute,
If you've been thinking about updating your old appliances, now's the time. Because now at Lowe's, you'll find great deals, like up to 40% off select appliance special values. That's up to 40% off some of the best brand name appliances with all the bells and whistles to help bring your kitchen and laundry room up to date. All projects have a starting point. Start with Lowe's. Valid 6/21 through 7/12. U.S. only. Exclusions apply. See store for details.
And from that, coincidence. Yeah, I know. I couldn't believe it. Everybody was trying to get to him, and he was in the room next to me. So I was able to get an interview because he just walked out the room and walked into my room. But the thing about the importance of this, René, was that this man who did work at research and development in the Pentagon in the 1960s was given the artifacts from the Roswell crash to back engineer. And back engineer to take to companies, which is the military-industrial complex, to copy. And in 1960 is really late, considering that the first crash was 1947. So some of his detractors say, well, all that stuff, the NightVision component, the transistor, the fiber optics, the high-tenacity fibers, were already in the mainstream. Well, of course, if you have the Army and the Air Force being one unit in 1947, and they split off in 1948, the Air Force is going to get some of that stuff, and they're going to start back engineering way before the Army did. And so they're already playing with that before Corso got it from General Trudeau. In just logically, people use their logic. When you have these crashes, and there was not just one crash. I mean, in my recent book, I talked about the 1945 crash in San Antonio, New Mexico, which I spent 5 years researching. There are many, many crashes. When you get a craft, you are not going to throw it in the garbage. You are not going to throw all that stuff away. Logically, you're not going to do that. You're going to try to figure out how it flies, what's inside, what's the use of it. So the detractors would say, well, a lot of that, like the transistor was already in the main they were already playing with it, were already using it, they were already experimenting with it. They should look at the fact that the Army and the Air Force split in 1948. Now, Corso got these things from General Trudeau, and what happened was General Trudeau and Corso were very close because Corso did the Korean War. He knew General MacArthur. Corso was a heavy hitter. He's not just somebody off the street. He's a military man who worked in intelligence in Rome in 1945, and when we brought him to Rome, I dragged him all over the city so he could tell me where his office was, where where his headquarters were. I took him to all the places that he said he worked in, and he told the truth. And he was telling the truth. Plus, we researched his background. So, as the head of intelligence, he had intelligence background. And in 1945, he was at 47. He was at Fort Riley, Kansas. And at the back of the book, I have all his records of where he was. And he says he was at Fort Riley, Kansas in 47. It says Fort Riley, Kansas, 1947, when a cargo came by that was put in the veterinary quarters, and he went there, and one of the cases had a being in there floating in liquid. And he talks about that. He said that he saw it, and he put the top down and kept it in the back of his mind for later usage. And he said that what was coming across Fort Riley came from Roswell area. May not have been the exact being, but I mean, evidently there were many crashes. So that was his first encounter with this UFO situation. And then later on in life, in 1960, Trudeau, who knew him very well, gave him the responsibility of taking these artifacts that were given to him to big companies, asking, and he names them, and in the book I name what he told me, where he took them, and he said he took envelopes full of money to pay these companies so there would be no paper trail. In other words, the Army would give these companies, and one example for you, which would be really good, is the night screening device, which was the lens of the being. That circular lens the being had, which everybody thinks is the eye, was a night screening lens which collected light, and he said he used to play with that because you walk up and down the halls of the Pentagon and could see in the dark. So, these are, if they're doing night screening, and this is the Army, remember it's only Army, he developed these things in the book, which I added that he talked to me about the German scientists that worked with him. He mentioned Oberth and he mentioned Saarbrücker. And so my book is based on audio tapes of conversations we had with him in Italy. My boss and I, Maurizio Baiata, and when I was alone, I'd tape him because I'd never remember all this. And so I got his exact words in the book of things he'd say. Like, he'd go to Bell Labs or whatever and take whatever he was taking, the transistor or whatever, and he would see how far they came, and if they would, he said, first develop it for the use of war. And this is one thing he was very sad about. He said the greatest gift that was given to humanity was the alien body, the being, which he called a biological entity. It was a little machine. It was a clone. And in my book, he has the description that it had 4 lobes in the brain. It had 2 chips in 2 of the lobes. It had 1 lung. It had and it talks about 1 very small heart. It was created to fly the ship. And there's also a drawing there that he had because he said on the hand was like suction cups, so that this being, and this being also wore a band around its head, a silver band, and he added that they had quite a few of them at the Pentagon, so I'm wondering about how much they're really, telling us. And he said that this band would go around the being's head, and the being would be one with the craft and would fly the craft. It's like flying the craft with your mind. And so he talked about all of these details and about his role is going into these companies and asking that these things be first for the use of the Army and then given to the general public. And there's details. I mean, he tells me about a pen that could suture and cut that physicians could use that he had. It was like a laser pen. So there's all these details in there about the actual artifacts. And I really want to stress that if people want to read his real notes, and he had contact with a being in White Sands, in the missile range at White Sands near Red Canyon. They want to read that. His real notes it's on Open Minds TV. You have to download it. The name of the book is The Dawn of a New Age. That is his real manuscript. So when he came to Italy in 1997, because I invited him to a conference, he gave us that manuscript, and we printed the book in Italian. And the people that were back here that were reading the day after Roswell were complaining about mistakes that were in there, and those were not his original notes. I mean, what he was talking about are things that he was involved in, but he was never at Roswell. He was at Fort Riley, Kansas in 1947. So Colonel Corso, basically was important for this reason, that I never understood what the value of the secrecy was and why everything was being kept secret. I thought, it's the church, or it's the downfall of society, or they're afraid about the aliens. They think they're monsters or something. I thought that's their secret. No, the secret is economic. No. It's economic. I mean, because if we have the ability to have free energy, as Stephen Greer says, since 1950, it's going to bring down our whole economic system, because these things do not fly on oil and gas. No. So Corso was the turning point. So for me, Colonel Corso was the turning point, because I understood the secrecy. Why the United States I don't think any president's going to ever stand up in front of everybody and say UFOs exist. We have all the technology. We're just keeping it on the back burner till the time to use it. That's illogical. That's never going to happen. So that's why there's secrecy around this subject, and also why they love, whoever's managing the subject loves to put people under fear and talk just about abductions, and that's it, or show the little gray alien, which Colonel Corso said they were more afraid of who created that little clone than the clone, because they were afraid that whoever created it was walking the halls of the Pentagon.
Because they look human.
They're people.
Yeah.
They are human. I mean, they're human-looking. Everything that I studied from the 50s to today, they're space people. They come off ships. They walk. They're normal. They're human-looking. And I think that it's very comfortable for us to be fear-based, so we won't bond with those people. And it's very comfortable to have it be in the realm of entertainment, because then we won't take it seriously. So, it's very difficult, this whole UFO, subject matter. If it's not studied academically, it gets crazy. It gets crazy.
It really does. I mean, it's funny. I mean, I'm sure you're absolutely right. There's got to be an economic reason for it. Otherwise, we would have known about it a long time ago. And I had a conversation with Dr. Greer a couple years ago. We were talking on the phone, and he said that same thing. He said, do you really, really think that we need these heavy, jet fuel engines to power our spacecraft? He said, but the reason that we're not seeing the free energy use is because then people would start to say, well, then why can't I use that to power my car? Why can't I use that to power my home? Because then, the cat would be out of the bag, and there would be no more excuses. But, the thing of it is, it would cause an economic shift of some kind. But I do believe, as we've seen in some cases, the the jobs and other things that would be developed with the new business of free energy, the new, figuring out how to harness it, and like solar power that we're seeing so much of now in the big, wind turbines and things like that you see out in the California desert and all over France to power homes and businesses. So if that came on a mass scale, yeah, I could see it would certainly upset the apple cart and ruin the business of certain people who are in power right now. And so that's probably why we don't see it. Not that it would cause us all to go into an economic decline, but because it would cause certain people and certain businesses to go into an economic decline. And unfortunately, those people wield a lot of power. So we're still stuck with our high electric bills at home.
It's all interconnected. We would suffer too. I mean, it's all interconnected until they figure they're going to eventually release it. I mean, they've got it. They got to release it. But free energy isn't going to be free. mean, it may be energy. I mean, then you study like Tesla and all the people that that had these ideas about taking energy out of the void and so forth. And so, yes, we could live a happier life. I'm very close to the former Defense Minister of Canada, Paul Hellyer. I've done two interviews
I was going to ask you about that. I know.
Yeah, well, and he read the book, and that's what stimulated him. And he also called generals here in America and got that Corso was real. He was telling the truth, and there was more, And so Paul Hellyer has in his book, and see, I wish people would read The Light at the End of the Tunnel, describes how the world would change if we would switch over into this, because there would be no poverty, there would be no need for these separations. We could cooperate. We'd all live easier lives, and we'd have to change the monetary system. And it's so logical. The book is so logical, but evidently society or whoever's doing the managing of this is not ready for it, because there has to be a timing to all of this, and it's not our timing. But I'm going to add another thing that we better be soon. Otherwise, there will be no planet to have free energy in. And this is the messages that are coming out of South America. The ET messages are being given to people in Peru, in Chile, in Brazil, in Argentina, and because those people aren't interested in technology, they're interested in a paradigm shift. And because they don't have what we have, we're interested. See, the ETs that came in the 50s and 60s, they tried to give the message of anti-nuclear, be careful how we operate and so forth. Adamski, which is very interesting to me, Glenn Steckling, who is the Adamski, friend of Adamski's and so forth, told me that Adamski's message in the 1960s, and Adamski knew Kennedy, and he's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. He said that was part of the timeline where we could switch the economy to a space-based economy where we could make a lot of money from the spin-offs of flying in outer space, or we'd stay with the war economy, but we'd have to create the wars. And which can you guess which one we took? If you have a war economy, you've got to create wars to have the economy go, and then we have to create all the weapons of war. The very and some of those could have been back engineered. So it's a real mess. That's why, in a way, the dialogue I would like to have is a vision of a more positive future and a vision of a raising of consciousness of humanity. I think the reason why beings are visiting humanity, and these are many, many beings that are visiting humanity, are because they want the evolution of human consciousness.
Right. Yeah, well, That would be nice. We need it, obviously.
Well, it's kind of a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call in a sense.
Yeah. Well, it should be. I wonder if it is. And, the people that are kind of listening are all, it's like they're kind of preaching to the choir. They're the people that are already open to those ideas. But are they making headway with the other people, the people in power that can really do something to change? I mean, obviously people can make changes too. I believe that, each person can make a change in their own little realm, in their, in their own little circle. But the people that can make the big changes, are they listening? Are they willing to listen? Or do they already know and they're railing against it?
Well, no, I think because you look at the geopolitical situation right now, and I've been trying to figure it out because this is all part of it. And maybe this is time we're facing our demons. I mean, this is the time where something's going to happen, some which way, every way. I'm not going to predict, but something will happen. This is not normal. There's no normal here. I mean, whether it be here or Europe or whatever, there's no normal. This is bizarre. It almost looks like we're going back to the 60s with Russia being the enemy and America going against Russia. I mean, it looks like deja vu. But I'm convinced that if we, through an awareness, and by the way, all the contactees that I've been interviewing lately, and I have a book called All the Above and Beyond that came out last year. And it's even though it's a 300-page book, it's got 7 of the Latin American contactees in there, and it's got a lot about time travel. And I had interviewed Dan Bursch, I interviewed Al Bielek, I did the Charles Hall case, the tall white aliens. I mean, it's all in there. And these peoples, these cultural peoples, know that individuals can change a society too. It doesn't need to be politicians. It doesn't need to be the people that are ruling the world. It could be individuals and individual thinking. And I remember John Mack. He's such a sweetheart. I love John Mack. He said to me, unless people change their worldview to accommodate this phenomenon, nothing's going to happen. But we need to change the way we think. So that's why I created something like Laughlin, to change the thinking, to change the way we think about it, that we're more similar than different, that we are one, that we are a human species. I mean, those guys up there, the ETs they're not going, this guy's Chinese, this guy's, Spanish, this guy. They're going, that's human race. I mean, we're one species.
Yeah, I totally get it. I totally agree. It's kind of crazy. I think, you hear all these, negative conspiracy theories about, one world is like a bad thing, but there's definitely a positive side to thinking in terms of one world and looking at everyone as though we're all part of each other. If we're all part of each other, we're all related, we're all part of the same group, then it seems like we'd be less likely to maybe kill each other or wage war on each other. So I do see a real upside to that kind of one world view, because if we don't start thinking that way, then some of us are going to kill all the rest of us. Yeah, I think it's more likely something like that would happen than, we hear a lot of, some kind of, astronomical disaster, an asteroid or something hitting the Earth and destroying everything. I think it's more likely that we're going to do it to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, all you need, but, we can come together over catastrophe, and I'm hoping that we don't, because I remember when there was a tsunami in the Pacific, everybody came together. They sent clothes. Everybody was, was close to everybody. I mean, but I'm hoping we don't need that. I mean, because that catastrophe would bring the whole world together in 2 minutes. I mean,
a
modern catastrophe like a tsunami or an earthquake, and in the west coast of America. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, but why do we need to do that? I don't want to do it that way. I don't want to come together because of some huge ecological disaster, an earthquake, a tsunami, war or something. I would like to come together because we are the same. I mean, I remember Edgar Mitchell, and he was another friend of mine. He said when he was out in space and he was coming towards Earth, he never saw any borders. He couldn't see the borders from out there. And he said he had a very spiritual epiphany that he was not only one with the Earth, but he was one with the stars in the universe. And I think that's the basic truth, don't you? That's the basic truth.
Yeah, it sounds right to me. I mean, it's funny, and we were talking a little bit earlier about this, about how there sometimes the people that work in the field of ufology, and a lot of people that have been in space, like Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, it seems like at some point, you start to see a convergence of the spiritual and the scientific. And I know that you're going to be covering that in the conference. I was reading something about one of your speakers, and it was a woman that you mentioned earlier. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name at the moment, but I wasn't familiar with her, but I thought, boy, I would sure like to hear what she has to say on that, because it does seem like that there is a convergence in some corners of people being open to it's sort of like, if you're a scientist, you shut off the other side. If you're a spiritual person, you shut off, the sort of analytical side. But there really is something good that happens when those two join together, because, like you were saying about the bands that the aliens would wear around their heads that made them one with the ship. I can see how that could work, and I've often felt that way when I was often running on some research that I was doing on something I was really passionate about, some magnificent obsession I was chasing, and I would feel like I was just, the right book was falling into my hands, or I would just put in some search and something I wasn't looking for popped up, but it was just the right thing that I needed. And I'd often feel like, kind of one with my computer at some times or another. So I can see how that could actually work and be true and be enhanced by technology. But there's so much that so much more that I want to ask you about Colonel Corso and others that you've talked to, because I know he's only one, but he is the subject of your new book. So I definitely want to put that out there and let people know how they can get it. Now, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more with Paola Harris. Stay with us. Welcome back for the final half hour of Night Vision. I'm your host, René Barnett, and with me is Paola Harris. She's a photojournalist, an author, a speaker, and a conference producer. And want to remind you once again that she's got the Starworks USA conference coming up at starworksusa.com. Check it out. It's coming up in November in Laughlin, and I guess you could say it's a UFO conference, but it's sort of a UFO conference of a different kind. So check it out, because it's going to be different and not your usual fare, but a lot of people you're going to recognize, and some new speakers that should be fun too, because I know there's some definite sessions in there that I want to sit in on. I saw some great stuff, as we were talking about on the break, Paola. I think we need a new way of looking at things and not rejecting one side or the other.
Yeah, well, it's a new worldview, and that's what Dr. John Mack. And remember, he was a medical psychiatrist. He said that it has to accommodate all this. And we were talking, and you were talking about ESP and so forth, and using intuition. Well, these beings, when they communicate, they're not speaking with their mouth, and they're not speaking. They didn't go to school to study Spanish and Chinese and Italian, and they speak. They basically, the beings, communication with ETs is done telepathically, and it's a direct direct transfer, a thought transfer. And ESP in remote viewing was studied by the military, and if the military is spending all the time remote viewing, and I interviewed several people. I've got a whole section on my first book on remote viewing and talking about Ingo Swann, and I've got Courtney Brown in there. I've got Paul Smith. I've got Uri Geller. I've got all these people in my first book connecting the dots, making sense of the UFO phenomenon. If the military is developing ESP and these things for I'm for uses for the military, why are people making fun of ESP classes or ESP or people that have an intuition and so forth? Because it is a sixth sense that is valuable to regular people just as much as it is to the military. And if you develop that, and you have to have certain meditation skills and certain skills to concentrate, and you develop that is the way these beings, dialogue with humans. So that's why Clifford Stone, who will be at the Laughlin Conference, was chosen when he was a child. He had contact in the military. The Army knew, and so when he was 16 years old and he was not medically fit for the Army, they drafted him anyway, or he volunteered he thought he was on some kind of nuclear biological group that was cleaning up, nuclear biological waste, and he found out early on that his job was to approach a craft and communicate with the beings. And his book, Eyes Only, which I helped publish, he talks about cases in Vietnam. And just recently I interviewed Clifford again. He will be interviewed by George Nuri at my conference, and I said, what happened in Vietnam? And he said basically he was asked to go into this cave where these very strange-looking beings were watching the Vietnam War. And they turned around to him and said, what are you doing fighting over here? And so, it's like everybody thinks they're good or evil or giving them all kinds of agenda. I've come to the conclusion they're watching our insanity. And they're watching what we're doing. He has 3 cases that he talks about his involvement in Vietnam, and the other thing I want to make clear is we got to stop throwing these beings into reptilians, greys, and Nordics. I mean, that is ridiculous. There are 57 different races of beings, and the ones in South America are from a planet called Apu in the constellation of Alpha Centauri. If you read Ricardo Gonzalez's book, which I helped him publish, called Contact from the Planet Apu, they're people. And you can't shove them into 3 categories when there's 57 different races. I mean, the other way around was they'd come to the beings would come from other planets and say there's 3 different kinds of humans.
If you've been thinking about updating your old appliances, now's the time. Because now at Lowe's, you'll find great deals, like up to 40% off select appliance special values. That's up to 40% off some of the best brand name appliances with all the bells and whistles to help bring your kitchen and laundry room up to date. All projects have a starting point. Start with Lowe's. Valid 6/21 through 7/12. U.S. only. Exclusions apply. See store for details.
We've got to really study this so that we are treating it like an academic subject, that we have accumulated the knowledge from reading books, the sources. I said when I do a conference, I usually say, if you were in my class and I asked you to do a research paper and you were quoting internet, you'd get an F. You've got to go to the original source. You have to read Colonel Corso's book. You have to read Alan Hynek's book. You have to read Charles Hall's book. You have to read Jacques Vallée's book. You have to read, the books. And what the original source told you. You read Travis Walton's book, Fire in the Sky, which is totally different from the movie. You can't just go to movies and go on, and get all your information off television shows. And if you did that, if people really did that, they would get the answer to a lot of their questions. And go back to putting it all together. One of the things about Edgar Mitchell is when he came back from his trip to the moon, he was sixth man on the moon, Apollo 14, after, the infamous Apollo 13. He went into noetic sciences, which meant he financed Uri Geller's,
consciousness studies. Consciousness studies.
It wasn't him. It was the CIA that financed the study of Uri Geller and his powers at SRI, and then noetic sciences. He is part of noetic sciences is Dean Radin, the quantum physics that Dean Radin is putting out, which shows that everything is interconnected, and that isn't New Age. That's modern quantum theory.
That's science.
That's science. I mean, now we got the phenomenon. Now we're developing the science to explain it.
Exactly.
There's science that explains it. So, and people should know that it's not woo-woo. It's science. I mean, it's real science that's claiming that everything is one. That phenomenon happens when you have the head of Lockheed Martin saying we've got the technology to take ET home. And then Jan Harzan questions them and says, "Why? What's missing?" And the guy, the head of Lockheed Martin, Ben, I think it's Ben Rich, says to Jan Harzan, "Do you know how ESP works?" Do you know how ESP works? Yeah, you use your mind to fly the ship. Do you know how ESP works? And that's all he said to him. And then you have to connect. You have to connect the dots there, that there's a component in our psyche that is very powerful that can do a lot of amazing things. We had this conversation before, you and I.
Yeah, and just like they developed, artificial limbs, electronic limbs that are controlled by your mind. You think, I want to pick up this glass. It's just like as if it was your own hand. And I mean, they must have figured a lot of this stuff out, and I guess they're putting it out in a limited way. But when you were spending time with Colonel Corso, I know you got to be, more than just interview subject and interviewee. I mean, an interviewer. You got to be close friends, and I know you had fond feelings for him, and so I would imagine he really opened up to you at that time. So, can you talk about how some of your conversations went? What was he like? And I know you probably, as a journalist, do the same thing that a lot of us do, or just in life. When you're talking to someone, you're sort of gauging. Do they sound believable? Does this seem like a good, true, and honest person? Can you just give us a little bit about your perceptions about Colonel Corso? What kind of a person was he? And if you could share something from the book that may be new to us that we haven't learned yet. There's probably a lot.
Well, there is a lot. In first of all, Colonel Corso, I spent Easter with him in Italy because he came over a second time in 1998 to a small independent republic called San Marino to sign a United Nations resolution. The independent republic of San Marino, like Grenada, which was a small country in 1979 with Sir Eric Gary, they all tried to open this up in the to talk about it seriously in the United Nations. So when he came over in 1998, he signed a paper with a lot of researchers. Colin Andrews was there, David Jacobs, oh my goodness, Michael Heseman, people from all over, researchers from all over the world signed a paper to open this up with the United Nations. And I spent Easter with him that year, and that was the year he died, 1998. And what he said was that he regretted a lot of his decisions because he said that when he was in the military, they had made him, he regretted the wars he was in. He regretted a lot of, he said it was very difficult on him that he saw everything in retrospect, because he did the World War II, he did the Korean War, he was involved with that, and he said that basically he had a different perception of what the planet was like, and he thought that we were being visited for a reason. In other words, that it being in Roswell was because of our. You got to understand that Roswell, the bomb, the testing of the atomic bomb at White Sands there was in 1945, and we had a crash in 1945. It's in one of my books, but the 509th Bomb Squadron that actually threw the bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima were stationed in Roswell.
Sure were.
So those planes, the two planes were there, and so the crash that happened there was a result of beings that were watching not only our ability to blow ourselves up, but anything that happened was in their dimension too. In other words, when we discover something that dangerous, it also echoes in their dimension. It also hurts them. So Corso was saying, that we weren't wise in our decisions, and that he had the responsibility. He was given the responsibility to back engineer these things, but at the end of the book, he says the biggest gift that he didn't do anything with was the ET body, because it faded fast. He said, and he made clear allusion to the fact that he actually was at Wright-Patterson, and he made an allusion that he did see bodies, and he did. And the reason why everybody thinks that his intention was books and money is not true, because when he died, he hadn't made any money. Later on, the book, was more popular. But I said, Colonel, why are you doing this? And he said, for my grandchildren, the three boys, Nick, Andrew, and Philip. He said, they asked me, Grandpa, did you ever talk to E.T.? And so he said, I finally had to tell them the truth. He said, and the young people can handle it. He said, this shouldn't be hidden anymore. Stop lying to the young people. He said, this should be out in the open, because they can handle it, and they must handle it. They must know this is real. And that was his main intention, and he repeated that over and over again. And, of course, when we brought him to Italy, we brought his grandchildren there. That was part of the deal. We had to bring the kids. Wow. And we had them in Italy with us. And, Grandpa's not going to lie.
Yeah.
To the kids, he's not going to lie. So the Colonel was telling the truth about everything. And the details are in the book. He even talks about World War II, Operation Paperclip, bringing over the German scientists, how some of these, like Hermann Oberth, had great knowledge of UFOs. And he talked about the Foo Fighters, and this is all in the book. He went into details about all of this stuff, which was not in The Day After Roswell. But the greatest story of all I can tell you is that in 1957 he was the head of a missile battalion in White Sands near, he said, Red Canyon. And I've since tried to drive by there. And he said he saw a UFO that was on the ground. And he said he took the car, the Jeep, and went over to the UFO, and it was appearing and disappearing. And he said that he threw some cactus under it to see how solid it was, and it actually squashed the cactus. And he said from the left, out of a cave came a being. And he said he pulled out his gun and he pointed it at the being. He's telling the truth. And this is one of those beings with the headband, and he says to the being, friend or foe. And he asked me in the first interview he ever did with me, he said, guess what he said? And I said, he said, neither. And Colonel Corso said, that's what he said, neither. And then he said, the being said, would you shut down your radars and let me go? Because in those days they were told to shut their radars down during certain times of the day. And Colonel Corso hadn't shut them down. And so Colonel Corso said, if I shut down my radars, what do you have to offer me? And he goes, a new world if you can take it. And that phrase, a new world if you can take it, has been used in ufology, but that comes from the message that the being told Colonel Corso. So everybody knows about that phrase. And so Colonel Corso, when they gave me the first interview, and I'm going to be honest with you, René, I didn't print it because I thought they'd think he was crazy. So I never printed it until after he died. So I made a censorship decision that was very bad for a journalist. He gave me that interview and when I first met him, and then I told him I wanted to know about back engineering and not contact. But anyway, and he said to me, Paula, he said, do you know what a new world, if you can take it, means? And today, in 2017, I know. It means a change of worldview and a raising of consciousness. And the being said, that's what we can offer you. So, that's in the book. And then there's also a drawing of the being he saw.
And did they give him any ideas on just how we can do that? Did they give us an instruction manual for raising our consciousness?
No. There's no how we can do that. I think that the use of meditation and silencing the mind and any technique people use, I think that look, if DTs are downloading musicians, I'm sure if you go out into the wilderness and just calm your mind, you'll get some ideas. I'm sure from the universe, because we're all connected. I'm positive you'll get ideas. I don't think they need to give us a manual. I think we have it in our DNA to be more than we are. We have it in our DNA to be amazing. So I think that, they're just saying, would you guys all go be amazing? It's like,
please.
Stop killing each other.
Exactly.
Stop thinking negative. You're all amazing. Well, just turn on the amazing button.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, it's like when I was very young and, growing up, and I think, I'm just there nothing special about me, and I'm probably lazy and not that good of a kid or whatever, and then I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, what does it mean to be a good person? How do you be a good person? Well, you just be one. You just be one, and you can be one starting anytime. And so I think it's the same possibly with our consciousness. How do we raise it? We just do. We just think in a more positive way, and we look at each other in a more positive way and try to be a little bit of service in this world, whatever it is that we do, whatever it is that we have to offer. And I love your idea about, sharing of information with international researchers and experiencers. And, I think every field of study could benefit from that kind of dialogue and discourse, because you kind of see it in a lot of areas. It's not just ufology, where people sort of get precious about their own material, and they want to, keep this is my stuff, and, they don't share information in a way. And I've also seen, I have to say, not in just the UFO field, but certainly in the UFO field, that sometimes when people start getting a little bit of attention over their work or their story or whatever it is that they're putting out there, the ego starts getting involved at some point. I've seen it go both ways. The ego sometimes gets involved, and then they start maybe embellishing their story a little bit, and then it starts muddying the waters. And then I've also seen it go the other way, like we were talking about with people like Edgar Mitchell, where they start raising their consciousness. And that's really what we're talking about when you're talking about him being an astronaut and being way out there, looking back at the Earth and feeling not only just at one with the Earth, but with the stars, with the entire universe. And, that's an amazing goal for us. And all we have to do is do it, I guess.
Yeah, we don't want people telling us what to do, especially from outer space. So it's not like they have to tell us anything. We could do it. But another thing I really want to say as part of this show is that when things come out, the new things, like the mummy they found in Nazca, that people stop, debunking it before they hear all the news. I mean, there are some real UFO movies that are on internet that are real UFOs, and people think that they're experts and they go, it's a hoax, it's CGI, and they're silly. You don't do it like that. You have to do the research. I mean, you really need to research. You cannot, and I'm seeing on internet that right away they're going, okay, well, that's all a hoax. The three, they're doing DNA testing on that particular mummy, but there were others found in Peru, and the man that actually found them is a French scientist. I mean, it isn't Jaime Maussan or Guy at television. It's a French scientist, and they're doing the work. They're doing the testing of the DNA, and they're doing the work. And I see all over internet, it's a hoax. It's not real. We got to stop that. We really need to go the whole way and examine it all like a detective would do. That's why I love my job. It's investigative journalist. Every story I've ever done has taken me 2 years to finish because I have to investigate every part of it. If I started out by saying, I think it's not thinking. Research is not opinion. You can't. You've got to have an informed opinion because it's got to be informed because you did the work behind it, and it can't be. That's CGI. That's not a real UFO. I mean, I have gone to Switzerland. I have seen the Billy Meyer stuff. It's real. The difference is that it was sold to the Japanese. A lot of stuff, the movies I saw are real. There's no CGI, and Photoshop was created in 1992. So, and this was a 1970s story, but people don't get their facts straight. So, and the excuse, the Billy Myers pictures are too good. It's like ridiculous. The Pleiadians staged it all so that he would be able to show to the world. They staged it. They staged their flying over hills and everything, told them when to come out. And the reason why I did know this is because I spoke to Wendell Stevens, who I consider one of the greatest researchers on planet Earth. When he was alive, I spoke to him for 4 hours at the Tucson airport, and he was present during all of this. And he and Britt and Lee Elders that did the story on Billy Meyer. And all my colleagues just hoax, without ever bothering to read the book on Still They Fly, which is out there, by the doctor Guido Musbrucker, who was a skeptic and who did the story. I really encourage people to do the work, really the background work, to do the research. No opinion, but research, and then to read all the material that's out there, to read it in whichever form they want to read it, Kindle or hard books or whatever, because that's the only way you're going to get to the truth. Internet has really messed things up in the UFO field.
Yeah, it's difficult, because you don't want to be completely credulous and believe every little thing. That's why, as you said, it's so important. Don't believe it, but don't also dismiss it out of hand, I guess is a good way to look at it. The point I'm making
is to read the source. Read Colonel Corso's book. In other words, if you're going to get you're going to get a degree in anthropology, you're not going to just read your own book. You're not going to read just one book. They make you read every book. They make you do the research, and you get your degree in anthropology.
Wow.
And why can't we do this with ufology? Why can't people study it?
We need to, Paola. Paola Harris, thank you so much for joining me. The music's rolling, and we've got to go. But you've got to promise that you'll come back again sometime because there's so much more to talk about.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Celebrate the holiday with great savings during Lowe's Go Forth event. Make your patio a happening hangout for family and friends with up to 25% off select patio furniture and outdoor decor. And your guests are gonna be hungry, so be prepared to grill with a 2-pack of Kingsford charcoal now for just $9.88. All projects have a starting point. Start with Lowe's. Patio and charcoal offers valid while supplies last in U.S. only. Charcoal offer limited to 2 bags per customer, 6/28 through 7/5.